Today's witness is called Malchus. He's about 45, rather bald, a pale, bony face, light hair and eyes, a sharp nose and a rather pursed mouth, a precise way of speech. His witness is of a betrayal and of arrest at night, and a cowardice foreseen, and of a healed ear. It would be as well, I would suggest, for you to understand fully that in the matter of the recent arrest and death of the Galilean, I had no personal animosity toward him at all. None at all. And neither have my colleagues towards the ill-advised followers of Jesus, against whom they are at present drafting regulations. We carry out orders. We are servants of the temple, with civil authority and influence. Civil servants, if you like. We are bedrock, foundation. The leaders, the spokesmen, the ministers change, governments change. We do not. It was ever so. It will always be so. Nothing personal. When my master Caiaphas said some time ago that it would be better for Jesus to die than the whole nation should suffer and be destroyed, he was speaking good sense as he saw it. As a high priest, he has a difficult job, even with our help. Jesus is dead, the thing is done. Soon he will be forgotten, but there was nothing personal. When Caiaphas made that statement, I don't think he'd ever met or seen Jesus. But miracle workers and faith healers and raisers from the dead can be very disruptive and troublesome. And the Romans are touchy enough on the subject of what my master calls matters religious. Pilate hates all religions, all priests, high priests in particular. An impossible man, Pilate. Certainly I have reason to be grateful to the late Jesus. He attended to a head injury of some mine that could have been most disfiguring. I would like to have repaid him in some way, but it was far too late in the day. Very apt statement that, far too late in the day. And a fact. What a day too. I would have liked to have spared him at least the flogging, but that was by order of Pilate. A Roman touch. Crucify, but the scourge whips first. I'm told that the Galilean prophesied his death. So did I, friend, so did I. I don't have prophetic powers or second sight. I have records. I have on record the exact day that one of his chosen friends, one of the so-called 12, came here to give him to me. I say give to us, to sell him to us. It's always a money transaction. It's allowed for. There's a fund, cash, unreceipted in silver. We took Jesus in a garden at night. A detail of the temple guard, 2 officers, 10 men, and the informer, to positively identify. We knew that he would be with others, and we wanted no mistake. I went along, really to see we got our money's worth. Jesus, the leader. We were not interested in the 12. Our experience in such matters is that once the ringleader is picked up, the followers stop following and feed away. We were right. They were all in hiding. The big surprise was that 1 or 2 of them were armed. Most unexpected. Could have been fatal in my case. When the informer, Iscariot, had identified by touching, we went forward to make formal arrest. At that moment, one of the 12, a huge, bearded man, stepped forward with a short sword and very nearly took my ear off. I was covered in blood. The blow had clubbed as well as cut me. I was dazed. I heard the guard rush forward and a lot of shouting, and then the Galilean's voice speaking quietly. Someone put a bandage round my head, almost holding the ear back in place. I remember thinking to myself, well, Jesus, if you're such a healer, heal me. It was almost as though he heard me. He put his 2 hands up over my 2 ears and said, it will heal, there will be no pain. He said other things about prophecies coming true and why we would be so busy with guards when we could have picked him up at the temple any time. And was he a bandit or something? I paid little attention to him. I had no pain, but I hate the sight of blood, and I was messy and sticky with it. I left him to the men, who took him to the senior high priest, Annas. Annas, my master's father-in-law. The old man, we called him. The real power behind the throne, that one. He'd been high priest, the high priest, for years and years. He made all 5 of his sons high priests too, and when his daughter married, his son-in-law, Caiaphas, as well. Well, anyway, one of the soldiers took me back home to the palace of Caiaphas, and I went to my room and changed my clothes and washed away the blood. I was going to change the bandage too, but didn't. Our reports said that Jesus had positively cured people by the laying on of hands, and he'd touched me, and certainly the pain had gone. I felt fine. I looked down into the courtyard below my window. The palace guard had made their usual bonfire. It looked cheerful. I saw one of the arrest officers come through the gates on a horse, and I went down. He told me that the old man would question Jesus and would then send him across to us, to Caiaphas. The officer told me that he'd left as the interrogation began, and that the prisoner and escort would arrive in about 2 hours. I thanked him and invited him in for a drink. We talked, and he was surprised that my wound was giving me no pain, that I seemed unworried by it. He suggested the garrison medical officer might look at it, perhaps find stitches in it. I refused. He didn't mind. After a little while, one of the maidservants came in and told us that one of the 12 was in the courtyard warming himself at the fire. I asked him how she knew. She said she'd been to hear Jesus many times, and the 12 were always with him. She knew them all by sight. "Is it the informer?" I asked her, "Iscariot?" She said no. I gathered she had no opinion of our informer. "Are you sure?" I asked her. "Did you speak to him?" She said, "Yes, I'm sure. And I did speak to him. He denies it. He said he doesn't know Jesus." She seemed upset. I sent her away. She was amused. It seemed a foolish action on the fellow's part, whoever it was. I looked out of the window. There were quite a few people round the fire, many with their backs to me. I was curious, and I asked the officer to go down. I watched and saw him speak to a rather big man for a minute or two and then leave him. He came in and went back to his chair. "I think the girl is right," he said. "In fact, I think it's the man who hit you with the sword. He denies everything, and there's no blood on him. It was dark in the garden, and there was a lot of confusion, and I'm not sure. What do you want me to do?" I looked down again at the man. He showed no sign of wanting to run away. He sat hunched, bulky, his back to me. I left it for a while until the officer said he should go down and to meet the arrest detail. I went with him. The man had not moved. I went across to him. He stood up. He topped me by a head and a half. He looked down at me at my bandaged head. I wasn't sure. I asked him his name, address and trade. "Simon," he said, "of Bethsaida, a fisherman." "A Galilean," I said. "Like Jesus of Nazareth, a troublemaker we now have under arrest. I think you are one of his gang, an armed bodyguard." He was looking across the top of my head. Jesus and the escort were just coming in. I kept my eyes on the big man's face. The good timing was not accidental. I know my job. "Well," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I don't know Jesus." I turned and looked at Jesus. He was looking straight at the big man. A sad look, but nothing to prove he knew him. I turned back at the fisherman and saw an astonishing thing. Tears were pouring down his face. He tried to speak, twice. Then he turned and ran like a madman across the yard and out of the gate. I let him go. If he's one of the 12, and the movement or party or whatever it is start to get out of hand, we shall have him. I shan't charge him with bodily harm or offensive weapon. No point. The ear is as new, perfect, no scar, nothing.